Hey everyone, it's Caitlin Smith here, benefits consultant at BKCW Insurance. This week, I just announced what this week's Thursday episode is going to be, and it is 10 questions that you should be asking this year prior to renewal. So there's 10 questions that I have deemed to be some of the most important questions for you guys to consider when you're evaluating your benefits for 2020. So essentially, there are a ton of different questions you should always be asking, and there's a lot of questions that should stem off of these 10 starter questions. But I think these are some really important questions to be asking and conversations that you should be having with your current broker. So for starters, let's go ahead and look at question one. So question one here is, are we on track to reach our benefit goals? So you need to look at this in a long-term as well as short-term perspective. So your 5-year, 3-year, and 1-year goal. Are you doing everything that you need to be on track to reach that goal? You need to also evaluate under this what is and isn't working to really help you progress to achieve those goals. The second question that we're going to go over that I think is extremely important is going to be, what is our employees' feedback? And how does that employee feedback compare to last year? So if you don't have a survey that you're using, I recommend going back. I do have another survey that you can look at for kind of a starting point with benefits. But it's really important to try and ask a lot of the same questions every year. You can always add more, but for benchmarking purposes, it is good to have a lot of those just set questions that you can go off from there. So what is that feedback? What does it look like compared to next year? So question number 3, what trends can we see that will be impacting us over the next 12 to 18 months? And what is our strategy to really overcome these potential obstacles that we're going to face? You know, this year nobody saw that we were going to have a massive pandemic coming, so you probably didn't necessarily have that conversation back in 2019, but it is important to recognize what is going on right now. You've got COVID, you've got an election, there's just so much that's going on in the world, and you need to understand, okay, what is happening now, what are we projecting to happen, and what are we going to do to make sure that we are putting strategies in place to make the most of this. So, you know, for instance, we're anticipating medical costs to increase. So what are you doing today that's going to positively impact you in the future? So question 4 then, what funding strategy do we currently have implemented, and is it the most effective for your organization? So does it make sense for you to be fully insured, level funded, or is self-insuring something you should consider at your organization? Additionally, you can look at, different other ways that you can fund medical insurance. So looking at, well, should we consider some alternatives, such as implementing an HRA, a gap plan, or maybe even putting some reference-based pricing in there. These are conversations and topics that you should be considering and kind of weighing the pros and cons of. It may not make the most sense this year, but you don't know if it might make sense in the future. So start having those conversations now and creating your pro-con list for those. Question 5 then, I love this question. What timeline will we follow to ensure that we have a successful pre- and post-enrollment? I think this is extremely important because it not only impacts you, but also your employees. Really, if you follow the timeline, that's where you don't see those crazy and stressful open enrollments. So I highly recommend making sure that your broker goes over their timeline, that you weigh all of the other areas that need to be considered, and that you and your administrative team also view this timeline and even sign off on it. I feel like that holds people more accountable if they go over the timeline and sign off that, yes, they are going to do their best to abide by this. There's always things that come up, but it's good to have that as a starting point. Okay, question 6. What education do you have in place to help employees understand how to use their benefits and the value behind the contributions we make for them? So how will this education vary if COVID prohibits us from also having in-person communication? So really determining what you as an organization want to do in regards to education for your employees, not just education on their benefits, but also the value of those benefits. You're spending a lot of money every year on benefits, and most people do not understand how much their employer is spending. So making sure that you are able to articulate that to employees and build value around those benefits. Question number 7. So In what areas did our employees have the most claims? How did that compare to last year? And what strategies can we take to improve our claims expenditure over the next year? So this is really important. There's a lot of information you can get depending on your size. Sometimes it's a little bit more restricted if you have less than 50 employees. It's always dependent on your carrier. But then additionally, if you're fully insured or self-insured. Obviously, if you're self-insured, you have a lot more information and are able to sometimes make more proactive decisions. But a lot of times, some of this information is available to large employers as well. So being proactive at not just having that information, but looking at it and determining what you're going to do to make good decisions and also make sure that employees are taken care of. So that's an extremely important conversation. If you're self-insured, you should be having this conversation all year long. Okay, so question 8. Is our technology creating a positive experience for our employees? Is it contributing to their education on their benefits? And is it streamlining processes for our administrative team? Is there another technology that would improve these areas and save our organization additional money? Will a carrier at Renewal help us pay for some of the costs that are associated with this technology? So this is another thing that I think is really important to consider. Technology, it touches every single aspect of your business, and I think it's extremely important to have a technology solution in place for open enrollment, especially this year when we're having to do everything virtually for the most part. So I think that the conversation around technology should be had on an annual basis, kind of weighing those pros and cons as well, and making sure and seeing, well, is there anything else that we could have access to that would improve our employee experience while also, maybe saving some work for us on the admin side. So I think that you don't ever want to get stuck doing the same thing over and over again. So it is good to have some of those evaluations around technology and really just determine if you do need to make some changes this year. So question 9, and I think I've talked about this in one of my other blog posts, but how much do you pay your consultant and why? You need to be asking and having this conversation. There needs to be a transparent conversation about this and really making sure that it's very transparent what is and isn't being provided and making sure that you're talking about this and that there is a fair price going on. We talked about how there's, you can do commission or you can do fee-based, per employee per month. There's a bunch of different areas in regards to how your consultant gets paid. And I think that definitely needs to be a topic of conversation for you. Question 10, and the last question we have here today. So what areas of compliance do we need to pay attention to, and what areas are we more susceptible to have risk with? So what is our plan to overcome these potential compliance risks that may come up in the next year? So compliance is an extremely, extremely important topic. You need to make sure that you have resources in place and that you're having those conversations. Who knows? Maybe the Affordable Care Act would be taken away and the legislation is going to change on that. What are those risks that are going to be associated with that, and how are you preparing for that? So making sure that whether it be that Corey fees, ACA like we talked about, FMLA, whatever it may be, what risks are you open to and what are you doing to help with that? I have attached on my blog an HR audit that you can go over that might help with some of those questions for you. So those are the 10 questions that I think everyone should be asking prior to renewal this year. There's a lot of other questions that should also be asked, but I think these are 10 fundamental questions that are going to set organizations like yours up for success over the next year. I hope you enjoyed this week's blog post. If you have any comments or questions, I'd love to hear them. But that's going to be it for today's Thirsty Thursday. I hope you guys have a great week. I look forward to speaking with you next week. I think we're going to talk about HRA, so it's going to be exciting. So stay tuned and make sure you subscribe to the blog. Have a good one. Thank you. Bye.